We turn our attention now to the president's trip to Asia. You're looking at CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who is in Tokyo traveling with the president and has more. Nancy, good morning from us. Good evening to you. The president may be in Japan today, but all eyes seem to be on China and this potential framework deal between the U.S. and Beijing. Fill us in on what that may include.
Well, Errol, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been a lot more forthcoming about what's not going to be in this deal than what is going to be in this deal. For example, he says that both the U.S. and China are now walking back some of these really significant threats that they've been making over the past couple of months as they both seek leverage in these ongoing trade negotiations. So China, he says, is going to start buying U.S. soybeans again. They had boycotted the purchase of all U.S. soybeans, which was devastating to the U.S. soybean industry because China is their biggest customer. He says that's now off the table, as is China's vow to place import controls on rare earth minerals, which is a real problem because China controls about 70% of rare earth minerals, and they are critical for building cars and military jets and all kinds of things. On the other side, he says that President Trump is walking back his threat to impose another 100% tariff on Chinese goods on top of the 55% that is already in place. So as to the details of what they did agree to, he said he wants to wait until President Trump and President Xi sit down and talk about all this in person in South Korea later this week. But one thing, Errol, that we do know is that Bessent says that the Chinese have now signed off on a deal to transfer the U.S. operations of TikTok to new owners. So China would no longer control the algorithm and would not have as much access to Americans' data.
Wow, that's a significant development as well. All right, Nancy Cordes there for us in Tokyo, just past 8:30 in the evening. Nancy, thank you. Let's dig into the specifics now with Isaac Stone-Fish. She's the CEO and founder of Strategy Risks, a business intelligence firm with a focus on China. Good morning, Isaac. We just heard there on Nancy Cordes walk through some of the specifics of this framework deal where each side appears to be walking back from its more firm threats. We've had months of threats and tension as far as trade is concerned. So how much optimism do you have that this one-on-one between Trump and Xi will be fruitful this week?
It'll certainly be fruitful in terms of both leaders being able to announce something that causes at least some calming of the markets. I'm definitely not expecting this to be a deal that resolves all of the fundamental issues between the United States and China, but this will be something that both leaders can go home with and say, I won.
Right, and it seems as though that both sides walking away from some of their more firm positions before this one-on-one is encouraging. But if the U.S. and China walk away from this truce, what happens, and how might that impact our viewers as well as businesses?
So if the two sides sign a trade deal and the markets assume that both sides are going to follow the deal, it should provide some stability to consumer prices, a decrease on inflation, and more investment, especially in manufacturing. If there's a sense that both sides are just doing a superficial deal, I think it'll continue with the business as usual we've had about a lot of unpredictability. I also do want to mention that companies are fully able to say, hey, we're worried about the unpredictability, and then raise prices for consumers. It doesn't have to be directly related to where the tariffs are. A lot of it is perception or the structuring of the perception.
That's a really good point. And there's one other detail I want to ask you about, because President Trump says he's open to meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un while in Asia. Why do you think that is, and how might that color the one-on-one with Xi?
North Korea has really been out of the spotlight, and when that happens, Pyongyang will do some quiet things to make sure that it stays in the spotlight. I think President Trump thinks that he has a good relationship with the North Korean leader and that he can bring the North Korean leader back in from the cold. I don't think Chairman Xi will care too much about it. He finds North Korea generally pretty embarrassing, but it could be another feather in President Trump's diplomatic cap if he can have a very successful meeting with the North Korean leader.
All right, so much to keep our eyes on. Isaac Stone Fish, great to chat with you this morning. Come back anytime.